This week on the MotoMan podcast, we welcome one of the most outspoken, insightful, and often controversial voices in automotive media, Jack Baruth.
Nothing excites me less in the world than a 1,000 horsepower Corvette.
He makes the bold claim that the automotive industry has a cultural responsibility to give young men an identity, a role it has completely failed.
What has the automobile done for young men since before the World War II? It has taken socially awkward young men and given them an identity and a task and a purpose.
But what happened to those dreams? Jack argues that the optimism we once had,
They hark back to a time when we were optimistic about the future, where we all assumed there'd be an even better Mark IX after the Mark VIII, right?
has been replaced by a series of massive cynical failures, starting with the EV transition.
There was a huge missed opportunity where we told everybody in the Western world the EVs were coming. They had no choice. And then everything we offered them cost $75,000, weighed 6,000 pounds.
The conversation then turns to the auto media itself and why Jack believes so many journalists have become willing mouthpieces for foreign interests.
What you're missing is that most automotive journalists have never worked in the business.
And if you're a fan of the modern Porsche world, you may want to cover your ears. Jack delivers one of the most brutal takedowns of the brand we have ever heard.
Porsche, as it exists right now, is a company without a soul, without a purpose.
But this isn't just a critique, it's a deep philosophical dive into why car culture feels broken and what the industry's true purpose should have always been.
The root of automotive enthusiasm in this country is young men getting a car that they want to be seen in, that they think represents them.
This is Jack Baruth, Unfiltered. You don't want to miss it. Jack, did you know that you are making MotoManTV podcast history?
I know now that you've told me, but what are we doing? What is the historical thing?
You are the first official guest in the MotoManTV podcast Detroit studio.
Now, I got to say, it's a lovely studio. It's
Secret location, don't tell anybody
secret
where it is.
location. It's housed in a gray square building in the media area of Detroit, right?
The Silicon Alley of Detroit.
Yeah, the Silicon Alley, yeah.
We hide in plain sight. Okay, so Jack, this is your first time on the show. Granted, you and I go way back to like a BMW program back when they still made a 318i or something like that. But I wanted to bring you on the show because you have a unique, not only a unique history, but it gives you a unique vantage point into the car world. You started in like the car business, like car business. Then you moved into the car writing business, but part of that was like you were in the software technology world. And then you kind of went into the classic car writing business and you went back into the software world. So give me like the high level of the resume of Jack Baruth.
I started working for David Hobbs at his BMW dealership in 1988 as a parts runner. In school, I worked for Ford Credit, the captive finance arm of the Ford Motor Company.
So Ford, the actual like Detroit company, not a dealer.
Yeah, it was actually Ford, and I was halfway through school at Miami of Ohio, and they gave me the chance to quit and be an intern with Ford Credit, maybe finish up my degree later. And I did it, and then my dad found out about it a semester into that internship and made me quit and go back to school so I could finish my philosophy degree. And I later on found out in a lovely evening conversation in Manhattan, your favorite borough, that the lady who ran Lincoln for a while did the same internship at about the same time I did, and her dad didn't make her quit, and she became the president of Lincoln, whereas I became nothing. I mean, just America's greatest race driver.
Did you call your dad and do your best Jake LaMotta impression?
Yeah, I was pretty stressed about that. I felt I was bitter. I was bitter about it in 1992 when he made me do it. And I was bitter about it in 2015.
Well, actually, let's be serious here for a minute. You Did you see a vision there? Like when you were working at Ford Motor Credit, did you see a vision of like, I'm going to make a career out of the car world?
Yeah, I loved it.
Like, give me 3 reasons why.
Well, I loved working in automotive. I think when you work in automotive, you fundamentally work in dreams, right? No matter what you do in automotive, you're making someone's dream come true. If you're building supercars, you're helping that person. When I was involved with the paint process for the Honda Accord to make a better painted Honda, you're making someone's dream come true there. Someone, that's their only car, and they need to sell it in 10 years, and it needs to be worth some money. So that's their dream too. So you're helping them with that. So whenever you're in automotive, you're in the business of making dreams come true. And I loved cars, still do. I mean, I'd say it loved like it was in the past. And I liked Ford. I thought Ford had the better idea, to coin a phrase.
What was the better idea? Ford Taurus?
Well, they were relentlessly progress-oriented compared to GM.
Like in the 80s?
Yeah.
Like
when
the
I was there.
Jelly bean,
80s,
Jack
90s,
Telmac styling.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about the fact that my branch head and his assistant got a pair of Lincoln Mark VIIIs. That's company cars, red and green, called them the Christmas marks. And the idea that an American company made something like the Mark VIII, I wanted to spend my whole life with Ford.
I've never been a Ford person in my life. I respect Ford pickup truck business as from a business perspective or a business case. Of course, I respect the Mustangs, but there was something different about the Mark VIII. It was a breakthrough design. It was more than just something that was based on a breakthrough design of the 83 Ford Thunderbird. Remember the turbo coupe? It was a beautiful car. Give me a couple examples of why that Lincoln stood out at that time.
A couple reasons. One is you had the 32-valve V8, which they call the Intech V8. If you remember, the Intech was the North Star competitor. It's a much better engine.
Much more reliable.
Much more reliable. The car looked purposeful inside and out. It was a break with tradition, but it was also respectful of it. So when you looked at it, you could tell it was a Lincoln Mark coupe, even though I don't think anybody could point to one detail and say, other than the Continental hump on the back, and say, that's a Lincoln coupe. But it was unafraid of the future. And ironically, now I look at them nostalgically because they hark back to a time when we were optimistic about the future, where we all assumed there'd be an even better Mark IX after the Mark VIII, right? That every year's car was going to be a little faster, a little better, a little more quality, a little more in the way of features. We wouldn't be putting a mouse fur headliner between the buyer and the...
We'll get to that.
The mandatory moonroof, yeah.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. So, yeah, I was a big Ford fan. I believed thoroughly in that Lincoln and in all the products. And I also sold Fords for a living in the 90s. I took that seriously, too. I worked for BMW Financial doing title clearance, learned a lot about floor planning, how cars are really, working for
the avoidance of doubt, that's how dealers pay for their inventory.
Yeah.
The rich ones don't. They floor themselves.
Nobody floors themselves anymore if they can help it. The money's too cheap. Maybe they're going to start doing it now.
I know a couple of dealer groups that floor themselves.
That's beautiful. I'd like to go work for them. I assume they have a really nice cafeteria. I liked everything about the car business. I liked doing credit approvals. I liked working with troubled customers at Ford Credit. I loved looking over floor plans. I loved selling Infiniti Q45s, and I loved selling Ford Mustangs.
Yeah, that was a hell of a car, man. The Q45, it was badass.
It was super badass. And imagine, you're me, you're 22, 23 years old. You got a 600 Ninja, so you're a cool dude, or at least you want to be.
You used to be.
And you're driving a Q45A at work. So
tell them what the A means.
The A was active suspension. It was only one-way active. It could extend the actuator, the shock, but not draw it in. So fully active suspension, which was much talked about, like Williams F1 had, where you could control both extension and retraction of the shock in real time. Q45A only could put the wheel down, couldn't pick it up.
And that was in like 92.
Yeah, 93, 94, I think is when you got your Q45A. Yeah.
Rolls Royces today do the same with a transmission, and it's today. And that's a $400,000 car.
Gosh, you know, I drove my LS 430 up here, right? So I'm about to display some real bigotry. No current Rolls Royce is made as well as an Infiniti Q45 or an LS 430.
I would go down on record as saying that the best Rolls Royce ever made was the Bentley Mulsanne.
You know, can I tell a 90-second story?
Sure, of course you can.
I was at the Tower Bar in LA. You know where that is.
Mm-hmm.
I had the new Wraith.
Yes.
And I was singing along with the house band or something, and David Spade disrespected me. He said, you know, get a load of this guy. And I said, shut up, David Spade. You know, it was like one of those great Chris Farley SNL moments.
Yeah.
And then I went out and said, there's a Mulsanne parked between the Wraith and the valet stand. I said, you better move that bleeping Mulsanne, that piece of junk. You know, there's a Wraith here. And I was with a lady who was impressed enough with this horrible shtick to marry me, I think. But in any event, I believe that the Mulsanne was owned by David Spade. And so I'd like to think that he heard me disrespecting his Mulsanne, and he went to the Rolls Royce dealer to get me that Wraith like that horrible looking man had. And they said, sorry, David Spade, that's reserved for the fastest racing journalist in America.
Okay, let's go back.
Mulsanne's great, though.
Mulsanne's a magnificent.
I would like to own a Mulsanne.
At some point, I'm going to buy one.
You know, Marshall Goldman, up between where I am and where we are, has a really nice one. I do look at the used Mulsanne.
They are, so I'm not afraid of the price of them. I'm afraid of keeping them on the road.
Well, yeah.
Every year, it's double whatever you're paying for the car.
You know, I think they're fundamentally reliable, but I think little parts like upper control arms and stuff.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with the engine. It's like, it's adjustable suspension pieces that are $5,000 a corner.
And because they continually ran like one generation behind the VW of the day. So,
yeah,
you know, they kept that Phaeton center stack in the Flying Spur for a long time. So yeah, you're right to be cautious, but when you get one,
God, they're beautiful.
let me know. I'm going to come hang out with you.
Absolutely.
Do a podcast.
Is that what I have to do to get you to come to LA?
That would do it, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
then you know what?
Yeah.
I'll do it. You're worth it.
Yeah.
So let's go back to, you made, I think, a really bold statement here. And you, I would say, qualified to give us an answer. That was back when we thought there would be a better Mark IX. We thought we had more hope for the future.
Yeah.
I know this is like, I'm giving you like a wide berth here, but what changed?
I think a couple things changed, and understanding that this isn't a political podcast, and
I do want to make one point here.
Please.
I get a lot of crap for stay out of politics. Stay in your lane. I want to go on record saying, I'm not getting into politics. Politics came into my lane.
I think we have changed the nature of economic opportunity in this country. I think it excludes a lot of young people. I think the opportunities have drastically shifted up, both in terms of the age of people who have the opportunities and the base wealth of the people who take advantage of the opportunities. Most of the people who are watching this, who are car people, and they're 35 or above, they're going to have a formative experience that's probably related to an affordable car, to an affordable new car, an affordable used car. You know, when I was a kid, I knew this girl, she had a 68 Skylark with a 350 in it.
Cool car.
And she'd paid $400 for it, and she'd fix it out in the driveway of her apartment with whatever she could get. I don't think there's any modern equivalent to that. I don't think there's any affordable way for young people to get into cars. And you can define it any way you want. You can define it as there are very few good $5,000 cars for young people. You can also define it as there are very few good $30,000 cars for young working people, recent graduates. And even if they were there, are the jobs there for them? So without going too far into, you know, everything's downstream from the decisions we make in this country, I think the tougher we make it for young people to have anything, the tougher we're going to make it for them to enjoy cars. And because optimism is fundamentally the province of young people and stupid people, we're reducing our national supply of optimism.
So you made a comment there, this country, or is this limited to just this country, or is it really a Western civilization issue?
Yeah, it could be Western Civ. I mean, I was just in Germany, and I didn't see a lot of young people driving new cars. I didn't see a lot of young people driving at all.
Is that a function of economics, or is that a function of people's interests have changed into technology.
I will go to my grave in the near future believing that interest in cars is a function of what's available. And the culture about cars is driven by the product, has ever been thus. Every car mag, every buff book, everything's always been driven by new product. The Utopian, Jalopnik, all driven fundamentally by new product. I mean, even the sites that say they're not are driven by new product. It's all about what's next. And we don't have a lot of what's next to offer. And that affects enthusiasm.
I'm going to play the contrarian on this one. What's next is a 1,000 horsepower Corvette.
For whom?
Okay, it's not cheap, but it's not as much as the car that has the same output that has a badge from Europe. Isn't that something to be interested about or excited about?
Nothing excites me less in the world than a 1,000 horsepower Corvette.
Okay, how about a 220 horsepower Toyota that you can buy for 30 grand with a manual transmission?
Which one is that?
The GR Corolla. No, excuse me, the GR.
The thing that blows up?
The 86.
Yeah, the one that you
The
can't...
Subaru.
Oh, yeah, I mean, Toyota has 3 sporting cars. They have the GR86, which is a Subaru and which blows up. They have the GR Corolla, which is running 270 degrees oil temperature on Western tracks.
Love that.
And also blows up. And they have the Supra.
They don't have the Supra anymore.
Well, the Supra's on hiatus.
They pulled the plug on that.
Yeah, they had the Supra, which was a BMW, which is not what people think of. I love Toyota. I mean, as you know, I'm a confirmed Lexus loyalist.
You are 3 times over.
Yeah, but I can't say much about Toyota's enthusiast strategy.
But that's what makes Toyota. Toyota is a company where you buy a car, you drive it for 20 years, it doesn't die on you, you just get sick of it, you hand it to the kids, and you tear another one off the roll.
Right. And that was fulfilled very well by stuff like the original Hachiroku, right? The gosh, what did we actually call it? There was the SR5, and then there was the
86?
Yeah, so it was the GTS, I think, right? SR5 and GTS. The SR5 was 8 valves, GTS was 16 valve. The Toyota Corolla FX16, if you remember that.
That was a cool car.
That was a cool car. It was
stupid looking, but cool car.
$7,995, I think. And it was shot through with enthusiasm.
But if you translate that kind of money into $2,025, that's your $32,000 GR86.
I'll say that, but I'll also say this. In between all my car stuff, I was a grocery bagger for a living. And we had a grocery bagger who had an FX16. And he made the payments bagging groceries. So I don't know if anybody's going to make the payments on the new GR86 doing...
Groceries,
yeah, or working at Starbucks or whatever.
Fair point. Does that mean that the industry has, I don't want to say become calcified, but has become too much of the nondescript crossovers? They've painted themselves into the beige corner?
You have to give people what they want, right? But what I'll say, and I realize I'm jumping forward to future topics, but...
You are.
We've been offered an EV transition, right? All we heard about it was the inevitable transition, the EV transition. It's been funded more lavishly than the XB70 Valkyrie. It's been relentlessly puffed by every media outlet in the world. It has become an article.
I'd like to say not every media.
Not every, not at avoidablecontact.substack.com. But
nice plug.
Thank you. It's been socialized into a generation of young people.
I'd go so far as to saying it was a culture thing.
Yeah.
Everything is downstream of culture.
So let me ask you this. Where's the $10,000 super quick, short range, dirt cheap EV?
It's in China, and it's only $10,000 because of how they, let's say, price their labor.
Right. So, but if you say that, then I'm going to say, where's the $15,000 one?
No, if you say that, then they call you, oh, you're a bad man. You're a terrible person.
Well, I mean, we could discuss currency manipulation. We could discuss pegging the...
But then people would yell at us to stay in our lane.
Pegging the currency, not the journalists. I'm not here to tell any stories about people I personally know who could, probably don't want that story.
Jack's a real charmer.
Anyway.
I can tell.
So there's no $15,000 enthusiast TV. There's no $20,000 enthusiast TV. We can go up. The first Enthusiast EV is either the Mach E or the Model 3 Performance that my brother just got.
Oh, you're a liar. No. A Mach E is not an Enthusiast EV. A Mach E GT, maybe.
Okay, so how much is that?
Maybe. That's
$55,000?
$65,000.
And the M3, my brother started calling this thing the M3, God help us. The M3 is $56,000, I think.
An M3? An M3 is $73,000.
I mean the Model 3 Performance.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Which the Tesla people call the M3.
I would counter with the cheapest Enthusiast EV, and don't laugh at me, the two-wheel drive eDrive 40 i4. It's the best driving EV out there because you can steer it with your right foot, and it's not like 5,000 pounds.
What's it cost?
$45,000.
Okay, $45,000. So
it's the crappy one.
Yeah, it's a crappy one, right? But what I'm getting at here is there was a huge missed opportunity where we told everybody in the Western world the EVs were coming. They had no choice. And then everything we offered them cost $75,000, weighed 6,000 pounds. I mean, the marquee EV for General Motors is the Hummer, which weighs 4 tons. And then the affordable one is the Bolt, which they just brought back. They just brought back the 11-year-old Bolt and said, sorry, guys, we don't have enough money to do anything else. So here's this. So when people ask why EV enthusiasm is so low, it's product related. Everything in this business comes from the product on offer.
You're not a business guy, but I think you should go into a bit of a business case because we did discuss this previously. Talk to me about some of the volumes of cars from like back in the 70s, compare them today, and then let's talk about the overall SAR, which is the seasonally adjustable annual run rate of car sales.
So in previous correspondence, you and I talked about this, where I said I thought that the EV market in North America, you could be easily predicted to be whatever Tesla can sell plus that much again. So that's probably 700,000 cars. Some of the cars that have sold more than 700,000, Chevy Citation on its debut year, 77 Cutlass Supreme, 78 box Malibu, or 78 box Caprice, the Ford Escort in its debut year.
Now, interesting points you bring. All the examples you bring are watershed of moments for those cars, like the 77, 78 Caprice, downsized, Citation, a downsized car, Ford Escort, downsized. So they were like bridging the gap. They were during the keelhaul time of let's take everything from this size to this size.
Sure. And similarly, you could say that the 76 and 77 Cutlass Supreme did so well because they were the last big ones.
Yeah.
But then the 78 Cutlass Supreme did well on the A-body, and you couldn't even roll the windows up or down in the sedan. So what I'm getting at here is this is what, 6% of the SAR, which is 17 million. So the EV market is not very big. I think the product that's out there justifies 700,000 units a year. If they want to do anything more than that, they should think about making an EV that genuinely appeals to young people. And you know what? If it doesn't have 300 miles of range, if it's not as fast as a Hayabusa, maybe that's okay. The Toyota FX16 wasn't as fast as my Ninja 600.
So there's an old saying, you can't sell, you can sell an old man a young man's car, but you can't sell a young man an old man's car. With that in mind, is there a way to double, triple EV sales and say, I don't mean next year, I mean like 20 years, 30 years. What would be your Jack Baruth reading the tea leaves?
You have to have a charging experience that matches gasoline fill. You just do. And the physics of that, the battery chemistry of it, the raw materials availability, none of that augurs well. This is not desktop computing where we're going to have an approximate doubling of power every 24 months until we don't. There are real technical, chemical, physical limitations now about batteries. And even if you can surpass those, and there's nothing to say that we can, what's the grid look like? Can you really get that much power? Think about the significant power involved in doing a 5-minute recharge on 30 Teslas in Las Vegas. if you go to Vegas, I'm sure you do for dealer stuff or for, automotive industry stuff.
Some events, yeah.
Yeah,
Not
the
often.
Model 3, the M3, is the default taxi and the default Uber car. So those guys spend 2-3 hours a day at the supercharger. It's remarkable how much supercharger time they do. And if they could all charge in and out in 5 minutes, they all would. And there'd be a lot more M3s. And the amount of raw electricity you got to come up with. I write about this on my Substack a little bit, which is great.
Not just the raw electricity, it's the architecture of the vehicle, it's the infrastructure that sits on top of a grid that frankly hasn't caught up with it yet.
And probably won't, because we don't do big infrastructure projects in the United States with any efficiency now.
Could you point to a kind of Western country that does?
No, but I can point to an Eastern one that does. China just built, the world's tallest bridge with a restaurant on top? Took it 2 years.
Yeah, I know. There was this meme floating around Twitter or X, whatever you call it, that they built the Golden Gate Bridge in 4 years, and now we can't even get a housing permit in 4 years in California, which is true.
Now, non-trivial number of people died making the Golden Gate Bridge. So that's, are we willing to accept that? They certainly are in China. I wouldn't want to see the fatality rates for this giant bridge in China.
There's people you and I know in this industry, who I've respected over the years, and they, it's like they're almost shills for China. In the way they go on and on, well, China's so far ahead in EV, and if we don't do what they're doing, we're going to be left for dead. And there's no discussion about how China manipulates the sales, how they actually pay or what the cost of labor is there, how they've done for the past 20, 30 years in basically trading infrastructure and money for either drilling rights or port rights. There's no discussion about this. Am I missing something here?
What you're missing is that most automotive journalists have never worked in the business in anything other than PR by other name capacity. The Chinese model of the ultra affordable, quick obsolescence, indifferently supported EV from 50 different brands does not work in the United States. We have dealer franchise laws. We have parts availability laws. We have a legal framework that has been built over the past 60 years. Sometimes it protects dealers. There's a 10-mile rule in a lot of this country for new dealerships. Can't be within 10 miles of the old dealership.
Every brand does that, yeah.
Sometimes it's codified into law now. But that infrastructure protects dealers, it also protects customers. When we send people like, Kevin Williams or Patrick George, both lovely people, when we send them to China for their I've seen the future and it works moment, people forget that the Soviet Union used to do that all the time too. That's where we get that phrase. I've seen the future and it works, right? It came from someone who observed a Potemkin village, basically, and said, oh, they're doing great things in the Soviet Union. These people don't understand that when you sell cars in the United States, you have to sell them nationally. If you want to have any presence, unless you want to be Morgan, the other best-run company in the business, right? Them and Toyota.
All 2,000 cars they sell a year.
Yeah. You have to be national. You have to have supply chains. You have to have a warranty that you stand behind. You have to have an entity in the United States that is judged capable by the federal government of supporting that warranty, of supporting parts availability. This is the kind of thing that Malcolm Brecklin used to chafe against all the time, right? And the way products are bought in China is not compatible with the way we buy products. They are cash flush. They have rapidly...
For the avoidance of doubt, the consumers are cash flush.
Yeah.
Not the society.
Right. Many Chinese consumers, a lot of them, from what I understand, expect to pay cash. So you have however, you want to talk about the pricing, however it's done, whatever the Chinese government does, however government and industry hand in glove, right? They create situations where people will buy new cars the way we buy motorcycles, which is to say, for cash on a whim and with no expectation it's going to last 20 years. And So when our journalists go over there and they see this panoply of shiny new EVs,
Mm-hmm.
they don't stop to think about the fact that half of those EVs won't make it 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
That the companies behind half of those EVs won't make it 5 years. That it's a culture that creates e-waste at the staggering rate. It's not compatible with how we buy.
I would go a
cars.
step further in saying China, they think in generations where we think in quarters.
Absolutely.
That is, at its core, from a business perspective, the difference.
But the logical extension of that is they don't expect ephemeral or temporary things to be permanent.
Mm.
When you and I buy a new car, we have a real expectation we're going to get 10 years of mostly trouble-free service out of it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Chinese don't have that expectation. They didn't get it from the VW Santanas that they bought from the from the SAIC factory or whatever that say. The SAIC is a GM, but they don't have this culture where people are pushed to the limit. They're buying the most car they can afford, and the first out of warranty expense goes on a credit card. So the Chinese model doesn't work here, and it's not going to work here.
So we're already seeing the collapse of the industry in China. Like, for example, I liken it to the industry, the car industry in like the teens and 20s, where you had like hundreds of car companies, but then it's just fell in on itself because that's just how the business is. It consolidated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's happening, the consolidation isn't market forces there, it's the government consolidating. My question to you is this: their labor costs, I can't see that as sustainable. Am I missing something?
I think their labor costs are sustainable inside their society. I think that both China and the United States are playing long-term currency games that mask some of that from us. I don't think that a BYD Dolphin is any more affordable for a Chinese middle-class worker than a Hyundai Accent is for their American counterpart. I think that when we talk about a $10,000 Chinese car, it's like saying, oh my gosh, I went to Thailand and the sandwiches are only 50 cents. That's not true for someone who lives in Thailand. It's true for you. You have a currency advantage. So the Chinese government maintains absolute control of their currency rate. They'll float or don't float, whatever. They know they have a 10, 50-year plan. They're working towards it. And that distorts what we see. It distorts what our journalists see. Your analogy of the early years of American automobiles are interesting. People forget all those early cars, the Marmons or, the Packards, whatever. They were bought with cash. People...
Even a Model T at that point, you bought them from a catalog.
Absolutely, a Model T was bought with cash.
Yeah.
People saved up for years to buy a Model T, and then they bought it with cash, and then they had different expectations of it than the modern American buyer. The Chinese buyer of 2025 is a lot like the American buyer of 1925. And the market conditions they face are a lot like the American market conditions in 1925. There are fly-by-night companies. There's, you could wake up and find that there are no more parts for your car.
So two counters to that. Would you consider what China has done in the European market, obviously not really here yet in full force in the U.S., would you consider it dumping?
I think the last legitimate case we had of dumping in this country was probably the LS400.
It was a $35,000 car.
Yeah.
New, and it competed against a $55,000 S-Class. That's different. I don't consider that dumping because that was maybe they were selling it at cost. When you look at what they're selling, say, the cheap EVs, they're all over Europe at this point, and as a result, people are eating them up because it's a 30% discount over like a RAV4. They're priced that way because their labor costs are artificially low. Is that considered dumping?
No, I mean, you and I are both old enough to remember what happened in 84 to 88 when the mark and the yen both went nuts against the dollar.
Oh my God.
And do you remember Porsche would announce quarterly price increases?
I remember $1 million Daytonas on the classic car market.
But if you look back at what it cost to build a Honda Accord in 1977. Was that car dumped? I mean, the dollar was awful strong against the yen, and the 77 Accord was, I mean, go back and look at what they were priced at. Do you know what was priced heads up against the Accord in 1978? The Chevette.
Ugh.
You know,
I owned a Chevette, sort of.
Yeah. When the Citation came out, it cost more than an Accord. When the Cavalier came out, it cost more than an Accord.
You would talk, if you talk to Bob Lutz, he'll tell you that was also currency manipulation, but it wasn't dumping.
Right.
That's what he would tell you.
Yeah, and you know, you had a great episode with him, and you know, he's well placed to know. But I think let's draw the line between things that happen on a national basis, which affect the price of iPhones and Chinese watches that we would never wear, as much as they do cars, and specific programs to take over a market via manipulation. You know, I'll tell you who the biggest market dumper is that I know.
I'm fascinated.
Yeah, the United States government under President Biden, right?
Oh my God, this we know.
Yeah, because we dumped EVs on the American people with taxpayer subsidies.
So, okay, now you've brought up an extremely good point. There's been recent blowback about that. We've had a recent announcement like in the last day or two.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened.
So General Motors, they're taking a $1.6 billion charge back on a realignment of their EV business. And $1.2 billion of that is, I think, mostly make good payments to suppliers. And the reason, and keep in mind, if Acura discontinued the TLX, which they're about to, you're never going to hear about suppliers getting $1 billion. In this business in general, suppliers suffer, rise and fall with their manufacturers. Rarely does a tier 1 or tier 2 supplier get guaranteed contracts that aren't tied to enough clauses that anybody with a high school education could get out of them. But in the EV space, they did have them because they had to invest so much money into the EV production capacity. And they were willing to do it because there was a sense that the government was going to make everybody buy an EV, that the game was fixed, that the end was known, the whole thing was rigged, and everybody was going to be made whole. And if they weren't, there'd be a too big to fail type of bailout.
Now, for the avoidance of doubt, this wasn't just General Motors that was offered this like blue sky kind of
Right, everybody was. GM is we're just seeing GM take their medicine right now. Ford certainly is a candidate for rolling some stuff back and paying some people off, but the way General Motors did EVs was probably the highest, without trying to position myself as a Bloomberg analyst, probably the highest cost per unit, effort per unit, supplier commitment per unit, waste per unit, whatever. They just did it worse than everybody else.
Now, an interesting counterpoint to this, you remember back in 2020, every car manufacturer around the world, they have their sales projections. And they had to go back to their suppliers. And the one supplier you really have to think about in terms of changing projections is foundries, the chips. And they didn't have to pay any fees to break those contracts. Instead, the foundries looked at them and said, are you sure you don't want this? Because if you don't want it, I'm offering it to next guy and you can't get it back for a couple of years. And it changed the course of history in an industry you're in, A&I, excuse me, I'm thinking F&I because that's where you were. But AI, I mean, that's the industry in now. Qualcomm, who was like a distant number 2 in that industry, they bought up all the remnant space and now is a serious competitor to NVIDIA. So I feel like that was market forces where this $1.6 billion charge was more a little bit of like you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Am I missing something there?
No, I think car production in the COVID era is a black swan event. It doesn't translate to anything else. The thing with EV is far more like any other cozy relationship between governments and automakers. And when those cozy arrangements go bust, you always have big numbers on the ledger. You know, I think it's a tale as old as time.
You know, you started this conversation saying you love the car business. I love the car business too. And you were saying it's like you're living your dream. I think there's another aspect to it. and it's only two industries that have the same thing. Airlines and the automotive world, it's like any other industry except it has a lot more zeros attached to it. And I think that's what attracts people, at least one of the aspects that attracts people.
I think, I think machines are attractive to people who are attracted to machines. And being in the airline business is a way to work on the biggest machines, to fly.
I would love, like, if I had to do all over again, I would do one of two things. I would be a car designer, or I'd be a 777 captain. Think about it. You work 10 days a month, make a couple $100,000 a year. You fly to like the farthest reaches of the world, and you meet hot women.
You know what a 777 captain makes right now?
777 captain makes like $500,000-600,000.
Yeah, my son and I were just going through the Delta contract because he's trying to run the numbers to go to the academy as opposed to go to a commercial flight school. And yeah, $462 with minimum flight.
Without overtime. And when you're offered overtime, if you're like the 787 guys, left seat for United, I mean, I'm a pilot. I'm going to embarrass you a little bit after this statement. Anyway, the 787 United guys during the virus were offered these ferry trips to do freight to and from China. Those guys were making $700,000 a year.
Yeah,
flying a 787. Now, granted, you were in prison when you get over there. They wouldn't let you out of your hotel room. Now, I want to embarrass you a little bit because you brought it up. You have a reputation being very outspoken. You're one of the smartest guys I know. But you know what I didn't know about you? You are an amazing father.
Oh,
No, I'm gonna embarrass you a little farther. He came to my hangar with his son, who is probably smarter than him, and we're walking around the hangar. And I stood there. I brought you to one of my friends who got all this crazy car collection.
Yeah, he had oh my gosh, he had
the bubble back
Caprice.
Yep, the Caprice. And this guy took 15 minutes to describe in gory detail how the glass is made, and his son was so fascinated. I got to tell you, man, I was blown away. That was a learning moment for me.
Yeah, the hot wire process. They used it in the Camaro too. Used it in the Camaros later.
Look at what he's become. What is he? How old is he now?
He's 16. He's a cadet major in Civil Air Patrol. He is the wing commander for the Ohio Wing. We always joke about it.
And did he finish his PPL?
He can't do it till he's 17. He actually did 6 solo loops on Friday. So he's about to do solo cross country. He is, he'll go PPL on his 17th birthday. Then he'll go multi-instrument and complex.
So he's going to go into commercial. He's going to fly jets.
Yeah, but I think he's going to go to the academy first.
Good for him.
He has a great record in Civil Air Patrol. He's a great leader. And he's running 2 squadrons right now. This is not, don't let me get started talking about my kid or my kids now, because I've acquired a daughter, as you know.
Well, that part, and another Lexus. No, 2 Zs. You got 2 Zs out of it.
2 Zs. The girls drive their Z cars.
And you have the Lex. And I'd like to point out, I brought this out for you.
Yeah, Les Paul.
This is another thing that he's a good father on. If you have literally time to waste, you can follow him on Instagram and watch he and his son jam in the middle of the night.
Yeah, he's a great musician. We started playing together when he was 7 years old. He did a little bit of Suzuki school style stuff before that.
All of us here at MotoMan are super excited to not only have the podcast back, but for it to be its own show. And there, we look to you for a little assistance. Can you help us grow the show? 2 really easy ways to do that. First and foremost, if you're reaching out via YouTube or other streaming platforms, you click on subscribe, notifications, or more importantly, share these episodes with your friends, especially on Reddit. Now, if you're downloading these episodes, listening via podcast platforms, we'd ask you to rate us. Stars are wonderful, but leaving a written review would be even better, especially sharing who was your favorite guest. So with that, I am incredibly grateful for your assistance in help growing this. And now, back to the episode. Yeah.
He's played some gigs, he's gone some places, and he loves music, and he's not, unlike his uncle or his father, he's not too wound up about it. Like, I wanted music to take me somewhere.
Yeah.
And all it ever did was introduce me to my son's mother, and I got a lot of free meals out of it. But my brother won the International Blues Challenge. Not everybody knows that.
I had no idea about this.
Yeah, he's toured Europe.
Wasn't your brother, did he do any car stuff?
He is now the chief executive officer of Coopable, which is a software company that offers dealership software.
Wow.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean,
But he didn't write about cars at all.
He
did.
He sat in a little bit. But anywhere, see, the way he and I always worked stuff is if I did something, he could do it, and vice versa. I played in his bands. We raced bikes together. When I wrote about cars, he wrote about cars. When, he made musical opportunities for me. I mean, it's just we're really close. And he's the worst person I know. He's got nobody else. So it's just the two of us, like the song.
Okay, so riffing off that high note.
Okay.
Let's talk some positive spots in the automotive industry. What do you see as 3 positive spots?
3 positive spots. Well, I think the Stellantis agreement or announcement that they're going to put $16 billion into U.S. manufacturing. They're going to revitalize their operations in 5 states. They're turning the Belvidere plant back on. They're announcing a all-new mid-size pickup truck, which is a good thing. We need mid-size pickup trucks in this country. You can't create market conditions where only full-size trucks sell and then gripe that nobody drives a mid-size truck, right? Mm-hmm. They are going to do an all-new large SUV in the United States. They're going to expand Toledo. They're going to add 5,000 jobs, plus all the jobs and all the opportunities that are going to come from those people. You're talking about 5,000 families who will sleep better at night. And you're talking about the people who work at the local Home Depot will get more hours. It is a rising tide that will lift boats in communities all through the Midwest, which is critical to me. Mm-hmm. I'm a Midwest booster. I live in nowhere. I live in flyover country now.
Okay, you're sandbagging us. You don't live in the middle of nowhere. You don't live in flyover country. You have a unusual view. What's your view?
So I share a property line with Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course.
Yes.
And my shop, we have 12 acres there. And that wasn't my idea, but I'm glad we're there. We're having a good time with it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so this Stellantis thing, that's the biggest piece of good news. And that has, when I think about what that means for the industry, and I'll give you a second bit of Stellantis good news. Let's just go ahead and do that. The fact that I've got all my little birds out there in Detroit sending me pictures of these very Hemi sounding Chargers driving around, so.
Do you still have your final edition 300C?
Yeah, I only have 10,000 miles on it. I never drive it.
Mm-hmm.
My brother has 58,000 miles on his. Is that weird?
Oh, yes, you guys both.
Yeah, we each got them. Yeah. I never drive mine. You
really do everything together, don't you?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, it's I don't know. We don't have a lot of individual imagination.
So do you see Stellantis being able to fulfill these agreements?
Let's hope. I'm not a Bloomberg analyst. I can't look at their balance sheet and say, oh, they can absolutely fulfill that. They can't do that. That's caught up in, whatever. That's not for me to say, but they're committing to it. They're going to do it. We were just told. The New York Times in June ran a piece that said manufacturing jobs can't come back to America.
Garbage.
They're wrong. And all it took was a little bit of will, and I'm not even political will, not even, just people willing to try it. People willing to, for once in their corporate lives, invest in the United States instead of looting the country so they can get on the last boat to China where they think they'll run the world, but when they get there, they're going to put them up against a wall. I mean,
ask Siemens Trains about that. Didn't go well for them.
Yeah, it never does. It never does. But so investing in America is great. And people have this idea that it's bigoted or provincial or uneducated to want your fellow American to have a job. And I don't know where that comes from. It doesn't diminish me if there's a guy at an auto plant making more money than me.
Mm-hmm.
It helps me. We're all in an economy together.
I agree.
I don't feel worse about myself. And my father, God bless him, he called me. He was confused. He said, why do all your peers get angry about people making money in automotive or assembly plants? I said, it's real simple. If you're an associate professor and you make $62,000 a year talking about why, tofu is racist, mm-hmm. and you find out that some guy who doesn't even have a college degree is working at the Chicago Ford plant, making $120,000 a year and buying a power sports piece of equipment like a jet ski or whatever, that's fundamentally upsetting to you. So you're going to, whether you know it or not, you're going to vote and behave in a way that takes that opportunity away. It reestablishes your primacy. And I saw it all the time. And manufacturing work can come to America. It was never everything we did.
So
But it could come back.
I want to weigh in here because I too was in tech, as you know, for many years. Not everything can come back to the U.S. Like that white or gray T-shirt you're wearing, that would be very hard to do in the U.S. at the cost.
Are you messing with me?
I'm not messing with you.
This is an American Giant shirt.
Okay, but how much was the shirt?
$80.
$80. The shirt that people would buy at Target for $15, that you can't do in the U.S. However, you can do manufacturing that is perhaps at the next level above. Like I was blown away, absolutely blown away when the news reports came out that Apple is going to start manufacturing their glass in Kentucky. And at first, and you and I are the same in this area, we are very suspect of the source of the news. So the first thing I thought is, this has got to be a joke. I couldn't believe it. But then Tim Cook is on every news channel announcing this thing. And I was excited for the same reasons that you are. Yeah. I'm a big believer that, yeah, it's great to bring it back and have the money come back to the country, but what's much more important, it gives people in those regions of our country dignity again.
I agree. And I'm just going to say for this is important to me, so I'll say it's not a plug for avoidablecontact.substack.com, but everything I'm wearing right now is made in a Western country. Besides my Grand Seiko, which was made in Japan. But my socks were made in the U.S. My underwear was made in the U.S. The shoes were made in Italy. Pants were made in the U.S. Sweater. So this is important to me. I seek out American stuff. Dearborn Denim.
I didn't know this about you. I do the same thing. Yeah, I try as much as like some of the camera stuff, you just can't get away from the China.
Yeah.
But I go out of my way. Like, what's it? I'm a distance runner. I wear the New Balance that are manufactured in the US.
NBUSA, yeah. My son who just ran a half marathon the other day, he did it in his NB 997s, and they're really dorky looking.
It's incredible.
Compared to the Air Maxes, right? But they're made in the US. It's important, people talk about community. Uber has this horrible thing they show you when you finish your ride in Manhattan or whatever. It says, drivers are important to communities right now, so please tip. And it shows you this Humans of Flat, corporate Memphis, bit of artwork. Mm-hmm. It rankles me. Drivers are important to communities. What a nonsense statement. What an equivocation. This T-shirt was made in North Carolina. And it was the cotton for it was grown in Georgia, I think. I look at this stuff. My belt was made by Artifacts in Texas from an alligator captured in Florida and killed. I don't always think about that. There is an opportunity to offer a hand up to your neighbor in everything you do, almost. I mean, you're not going to buy a USA-made single lens reflex camera. I don't think there is one. But you can absolutely buy a pair of American socks. And Dearborn Denim, I think, has this thing with Walmart or Target where they're putting $12. They tried putting $12 T-shirts in Walmart. I think the sad part was people expected to pay $3. Mm-hmm. But not all manufacturing will come back. But it does rankle me. I see people make $150,000 a year buying $28 pants that's sewn by some kid, probably standing over them with a vintage SKS carbine, to make sure he sews the pants. Mm-hmm. There's no excuse for that. If you can afford to, go to Balthazar and have the very best meal in New York City, you can afford to have a set of pants that's $110 that's made in the United States. And I don't see there's any other way around it. So let's end of rant. Sorry.
Let's step back to one of your earlier statements. You felt that there was a lack of enthusiasm in the automotive industry, specifically with EVs. Do you think this has something to do with it?
We need American automotive enthusiasm. We need young people working in the business. You can say it's a circular economic argument, no more than OpenAI to NVIDIA, but young people who work in manufacturing will go out and buy American performance cars. That's a great circular bit of economy. It's not huge. It doesn't account for much, but it's real. And we need to create an environment where the jobs are there and the cars are there for them to buy. We should have the equivalent of a Citation X11. The X11 helped the Citation sell 1 million copies. What's the modern equivalent of an X11 Citation?
So what's standing in our way for this happening?
So this is kind of a rant that I wanted to go on later in this podcast, but we're moving through so much stuff and it's great. A friend of mine, I won't call him out.
This is why I had you drive 3 hours to see me.
Yeah. He had this astounding insight. He said, automotive enthusiasm in this country has been harmed by the EVs in more ways than one. There's the obvious thing about, well, production capacity and R&D and everything gets pushed to EVs, so we don't get a new Celica GTS or whatever, right? But he pointed out something. How much money did Ford make on the Escort? You remember?
Not a lot per car, but a good amount of money. It was like $200-$300 a copy.
Overall, they lost money on the Escort. Every year of the Escort lost money. Why do they do it?
So they could sell more Lincolns.
Yeah, for cafe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also for manufacturing, to keep the dealers happy, the dealers needed volume.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have all these reasons to do affordable volume cars.
Mm-hmm.
One day, the affordable volume cars disappeared. And it was about the same
Now they all
day.
became Toyotas.
But the affordable volume gas-powered cars are largely gone.
Mm-hmm.
And they went away because the manufacturers were able to meet the governmental, social, political demands of the small car fleet with the combination of longer-lasting big cars. So your average Escort buyer in an era where cars lasted 6 years and died is now a buyer for a 6-year-old Hyundai Tucson.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. But the other part of it is that we made it possible for the automakers to fulfill all these other requirements with an EV. And the minute they could do that, the small car market disappeared. And small cars are foundational to American automotive enthusiasm. And I can give you 100 examples. The MG, British import, small car.
Mm-hmm.
The Honda Accord. All the years where people bought cheap Japanese cars because they delivered this fun experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people bought B310s because they were kind of fun to drive, stuff like that. The original 200SX.
Great car.
Great car. Yeah. All of this stuff came from cheap cars that connected you to the road.
Could you say that today's MG, Ford Escort, B310 is a Maverick, an Invista, and a Trax?
You ever going to see any of them at an autocross?
No, definitely not. But they're 23 grand. They're good looking. Well, the Maverick's now 28. But at least the thing I've said this a couple of times on different podcasts, but the funny thing I found about the Invista and the Trax, everyone I know that bought one can afford a much nicer car. They chose it because they like the way it looks.
You know, the Trax
is that enthusiasm?
The Trax is a bit of a styling masterpiece, but
completely. Phil Zach knocked it out of the park.
The enthusiasm that I want to discuss here is the enthusiasm. You know, I told you I bagged groceries with a guy who had an FX16. That guy is unlikely to put himself that deep in hock for a Trax. There's this, and I apologize, viewers, because this is odd saying 2025, and my wife and daughter are both SCCA race winners, right? So I'm not trying to be a bigot or a sexist here, but the root of automotive enthusiasm in this country is young men getting a car that they want to be seen in, that they think represents them. The whole Blue Oyster cult burning for you, driving around all night in your 63 whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we have gut shot that by making things like the Trax and the Invista the entry level.
Okay, I'm going to take this a couple levels above the car industry. I'm with you. I love the idea of having FX16s again that are affordable. However, how does having an enthusiast or a culture that is excited about an enthusiast car, how is that healthy? That's a bad way of putting it. I almost sound too politically correct. How is that good for America? Explain that to me. Or Western civilization, not just America.
Well, you're going to ask me to quote Robert Bly here. We're going to talk about...
This is where his Mensa level comes in.
This country is worthless if we don't give young men an avenue and a path and a way to excel. And it's one thing for somebody like me who's made a fair amount of money in my life and spent all of it plus 10% to raise this kid to jump 40-foot mountain bike gaps and solo a plane on his 16th birthday and win an SCCA time trial on his debut day. But I'm uniquely privileged, have been all my life. And if I'd been born in an Inuit fishing village, I would not have 3 Lexuses, okay? So just be real. I'm born in the right place, born at the right time, like Paul Simon. For every young man like my son who has a path and a goal and a way to get there and support all the way, there are probably 10 young men who are floundering, whose parents are working 3 jobs. They don't even, it's not that they don't care about the kid, it's that they're exhausted. You know, I deal with people all the time. I live in my little township, right? Talk to people all the time who are working 2 or 3 service jobs. There's no time to inspire your kid at the end of your second shift of the day. Our culture used to pick those kids up. We used to give them the Rover Boys, you know, Errol Flynn, Marlon Brando, James Dean, whatever. We gave them a path, be a rebel, be whatever. We gave them clearly understood metrics. This is what you do to be a man. It wasn't always positive stuff, right? We gave them paths, we encouraged them, and we told them the society would welcome back.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to put a boot up their ass to get someone to understand the realities of life.
For sure, right? And that's a big part of it too. That's like Boys Town or whatever. Like, you know, all these things that we used to give young men of every color, every type. We gave them a way to go forward, and we're not doing it now. And, you know, I go on Reddit, which, you know, you have to go on Reddit sometimes to find out how to get the center stack out of your LS400. And I see all these young men, even the young men on the Reddit motorcycle forums. My daughter had never ridden a motorcycle before. We put her directly on my CB11, and then she got herself a Ninja, and she's fine. She has crashed it once, but she was fine. And she's back up and going. The Reddit motorcycle forums are all these young men worrying that if I get a Ninja 250 or a Ninja 300, is that going to be seen as sexist? Is that too aggressive?
You're lying.
Go read it. I can't make this stuff up.
You need to send that to me. I don't believe you.
Yeah, it's horrible.
A 200?
Yeah, like a 250.
I sold motorcycles to put myself through college. We would laugh at the people who would buy a 250.
Yeah, I mean, I started on this. His first motorcycle I ever rode was a ZX7RR. But
you're a special guy.
Yeah. But we make young men so afraid now. They're so worried about everything. And there are reasons to do that. We want women to be safe. We want people in society to be safe. You don't want to have to worry that the young man crossing the street is going to cross the street and beat you up, right? But it'd be okay if we told him, hey, you know what? It would be really cool if you got the new Trax X11. You know, we do have that ad, but it's for women. Have you seen the Chevy Trax ad?
I've seen a bunch of them, but
there's a great Chevy Trax. If you look at what we used to show young men, which was Citations, power sliding around cones, and the Grand Am with 0.86 of G. The ad shows this young, kind of white, ethnically ambiguous young woman. And she's coming down the stairs from an elevated train. She says, I got the job. And she's a professional. I think it's Chicago, New York, whatever.
Yeah.
Then we see her move into a brownstone. God knows what kind of job it is to move into a brownstone. I assume she's CEO of Coopable. But then she gets a dog. She gets a chocolate lab. Okay. And then she gets this young kind of broccoli-headed black kid, right? And she's reaches over and impulsively kisses him in the tracks. And then they get out and walk the dog.
And of course, there's no father in the picture.
No. We haven't seen the father.
See, this is the problem.
The father.
I know we're getting off on a tangent.
Yeah.
We're doing a weave, but that's the problem.
And then they walk off to that battery park or whatever in Brooklyn or whatever. But we show women a dream. We show young women a dream. It's really explicit. It's like Scarface. So first you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the women. First you get the
yayo, then you get the money, then you get the women.
Yeah. You first the job, then the brownstone, then the tracks, then the dog, then this very handsome Lewis Hamilton type of guy.
Yeah.
And So we're busy.
Nasty Diaz brothers. I could do the whole
Can we
movie.
just
Man.
do-
I could do the whole movie.
Can we have Push It to the Limit play over this portion of it? Yeah.
Do I get a 928 out of the deal?
Yeah, this is like a tiger.
She just sit around waiting to get.
Her womb is so polluted, she can't even make no baby. Well, anyway, so here's the thing.
Can't shoot a cop.
We watched Scarface, and in a way that was formative for us. Miami Vice was formative for me. Dad, I'm sorry. You remember this. He bought me a white Armani suit and a aqua shirt to wear to school.
In Ohio.
In Ohio.
I need to see a picture of this. If you send me a picture, we will put it in the final edit of
Those pictures have been burned.
Oh,
if
no.
they were ever taken.
I'm going to find them.
That I wore that twice. I got suspended from high school both days for wearing it because somebody run their mouth to me and I'd have something to do about it, right? But you know, that was very innocent. I saw Sonny Crockett driving a fast car, wearing a cool Armani suit. I wanted to do that. So what dream? And look at me today. You know, I'm a Brioni customer, and I have one of the fastest cars ever, the Radical SR8, right? But what dream are we giving young men? It's not going to be to wear a Brioni suit and drive a Radical SR8 because that's I don't even know how you would get.
So are you saying, and this is quite a bold statement, are you saying that the automotive industry, part of its remit is to give some identity to young men?
Oh my God. How could it be any other way?
I never quite looked at it that way.
What has the automobile done for young men since before the World War II? It has taken socially awkward young men and given them an identity and a task and a purpose.
Is that still relevant in the world of the device?
Yeah, because all the device does is make you feel more awkward. Is there anybody out there? Do you feel better about yourself after you doom scroll for half an hour? Do you feel like you're doing better with your career, like you own more stuff than other people, like you're more satisfied, like you're fitter than other people? Of course not.
Now you see why I say this guy's a genius.
So, Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, great film. Such a great film that they literally had to rewrite everyone afterwards to bring it into the canon, right?
Yeah.
We meet the kid. He's a misfit. He's an outcast. He built his own car. He's in the shop class. His car is his identity.
Mm-hmm.
There have always been cool kids. You know, my brother, ironically, he drove a 944 and a G20 and a Jetta in high school and college.
G20 was not cool.
G20 stick shift?
The
brand new?
Primera front-wheel drive, that Nissan?
Cool car. I think it would lift a wheel on the on-ramp.
It was a decent design, but nothing exciting.
Imagine you're 19 years old and you're playing the ska festival and driving a G20.
I guess, yeah, 19, yeah.
I could tell some stories, but, you know, he and his football buddies, like the guys we used to hang around with, one of them went to play for the Packers, one of them played in the Super Bowl for Carolina Panthers. They won Gus Macker tournaments together, all that stuff. Those guys didn't need a cool car. They were intrinsically cool. When you end up playing for the Carolina Panthers, there's nothing about you needs a car.
Mm-hmm.
But the kid in the Burnin' For You video, who's driving around all night thinking about his girlfriend in the car he fixed himself, that is a critical part of the American story for young men. And we've largely taken it away from them. You know who Cletus McFarland is, right?
Of course I do.
Of course you do. Why do you know who he is?
Because he wrenches on cars.
Yeah, he wrenches on cars. One of my mechanics, this young guy, and Gavin, if you got this far, I'm talking about you. We're in the shop. He's supposed to be fixing my Radical. And what he's doing, we put a 80-inch TV in there, and you watch this Cletus McFarland do no prep drag strip stuff all night. These guys in twin turbocharged F-150 regular cabs and all that. It's still out there. It's still on the web. But we've turned it into this, it's like a fetish. It's a kink. It's like a subculture. It's like being a furry.
It's not being a furry.
I'm going to tell you.
Okay, no, I'm going to interject here. This is an important part. Do you think it's changing? Without, again, getting too political here, the world over the past year, both in Western Europe and the US, has the culture and then downstream about the politics has changed drastically. As a result of these two big changes, do you see this aspect, meaning giving license and identity to young men again, and partially through the automotive world. Do you see that changing?
We're going to see more of it because...
Why? Why are we going to see more of it?
Well, we're going to see more of it over time because with fewer EVs, more gas-powered cars, fewer expensive regulation, there's a chance for more enthusiast vehicles, and enthusiast vehicles breed enthusiasts. Just like very few people were watch enthusiasts when there were 5 Swiss manufacturers and you had to travel to Park Avenue to see one.
Yeah.
A brief side note, a friend of mine has a Ferrari. He's in West Virginia. The car dies. It's a 2-lane road. Can't park the car. There's no way to pull the car off. West Virginia trooper pulls up and blocks his Ferrari long enough to get help. And the West Virginia trooper starts talking about GMT masters and Vacheron overseas and all that. And my friend is flummoxed. He says, why should a West Virginia state trooper know as much about Grand Seiko High Beat as I do? I said, you know they get the internet in West Virginia. You know he's got a phone and a computer. And we have yet to do this District 13 Hunger Games thing where if you're a state trooper in District 13, you're not allowed to find out about the Audemars Royal Oak Alinghi offshore, right? The culture's everywhere. The Cletus McFarland culture is everywhere. The watch culture is everywhere. The culture gets to these young men, but then it's marginalized. It's a marginalized culture.
See, that's the part I see changing.
I think it is, but it's going to be slow.
Because people are sick and tired of being told what to think, and to say, people are sick and tired not only what to think, but to say, that is blue, you can't tell me that's black. And now people feel like the world, the culture has their back if they finally say, this is common sense, I'm done with this garbage.
Freedom is the ability. Winston, in your journal, you wrote that freedom is the ability to say that 2 + 2 = 4. That's what O'Brien tells them in 1984, right before they go to room 101 where the rats are.
This was one of our emails back and forth about this discussion.
And how does O'Brien beat him? He tortures them until he holds up 4 fingers and he sees 5. You could argue that what we've done to our young people in American universities for the last 30 years...
Longer than that, 60.
...is the equivalent of teaching them to see 5 fingers where there are 4. This is not something, and I say this both to reassure my most progressive friends and to caution my most right-wing friends. No single election, no small group of culture changes, no movement can alter that boat in anything longer than the time it takes to turn the boat. It took 70 years to get this country to the point where reading Huck Finn in public would cause you to lose your job and possibly be assaulted and go to jail. That was a long process. We will not get to a generation of young men doing burnouts in front of their high school and then, starting families in 7 years. Arthur Schlesinger, he had this great book. I read it when I was a kid, The Cycles of American History. And that oscillation is ever present, but what we see is the period of the oscillation decreases as our speed of communication increases. This country moved very slowly from liberal to conservative when we got our news by horse and telegraph. Now that you get your news via Instagram and TikTok, it can move faster, but there's still inertia. And honestly, I think you know this. I was a massive progressive. I was a Clinton volunteer. Bill, not Hillary. I grew up, I was a philosophy major. I was born in Brooklyn. I have all the characteristics of
all the bona fides.
Yeah, of a bleeding heart liberal, right?
What changed?
I had some formative experiences in my 20s, mostly related to me losing my temper and misbehaving, that exposed me to a wide variety of people beyond the people I'd grown up with. And I started to feel differently both about everyone's potential and my right to be paternalistic about it, when I was in college, I remember lecturing my father-in-law about, you don't understand. These people have no opportunity. And if we don't help them, if we don't change their lives, nothing will change. And looking back, my God, I was a 19-year-old idiot who hadn't earned $1 in my life. Who was I to determine the course of society, right?
Mm-hmm.
But every young person's like that. Anyway, all I'm getting is I see both sides, and this country is not going to turn into Mussolini's Italy in 18 months. It didn't turn into what it is now in 18 months. I do think some important changes have been made that if we take let's call it the David E. Davis car and driver philosophy, which is, how does politics affect me as a guy who likes to drive fast cars?
Mm-hmm.
I think we're seeing some positive changes. I think it was time to pull the teeth of the EPA a little bit. It was time to pull the teeth of CAFE a little bit. It was time to kneecap Tanya Harding on Nancy Kerrigan, the EV mandate.
Wow, you're really dating yourself.
Yeah, Jeff Gillooly,
Gillooly.
Gillooly is an American hero.
That's a name I always laughed about.
He's a funny looking
Nancy
dude.
Kerrigan is still hot.
I don't doubt it. I think
Tanya Harding, she hit the wall.
Nancy Kerrigan's one of these American aristocrats. That's why what does she say when she gets hit? Why me?
Yeah.
How could this have happened
God, we're
to
dating
me,
ourselves
Nancy
badly
Kerrigan?
here.
I mean, I had that same feeling all the time. Why me?
Okay, so I agree. It was time to take teeth out all these things. But what are some things that, you know what? Let me throw some things at you. Yes, or true or false? It'll help bring some dignity, some identity back to young men.
Okay.
Slate Auto, the whole customization thing.
I'm 100% in favor of Slate Auto. I met Tish. I know that you had Jeff Jablonski in there.
Good friend.
When I think of what good an EV can do, Slate to me is the paradigm of that.
Do you think it's too expensive?
No, I don't think it's too expensive.
So you are high on them.
Yeah, and I think.
Do you think they'll get to production?
I hope they do. I really hope they do.
Totally agree.
I'm almost as enthusiastic about seeing Slate as I would be about the return of a subcompact sporting American car.
Okay. Do you have a belief in Farley's vision of bringing a cheap car back to the U.S.?
I think that I think Mr. Farley is a bright man. I get a lot of feedback from the people who work for him that is often frustrated.
Mm.
Let's just say I think his goal is good, and I hope he chooses to do it by leaning on the engineering, design, manufacturing, and production assets that we have in the United States of America.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that Porsche has learned their lesson about the investments into EV, and they will not just extend ICE, but bake it into multiple generations moving forward?
I don't think that Porsche will do anything that their handlers in the Euro government as a whole and the German government that really determines the Euro government will guide them to. Much is made of Porsche and the EV, mandatory Boxster EV came in, whatever, and then the rollback or whatever. Porsche, as it exists right now, is a company without a soul, without a purpose.
Wow, that hurts as a guy who owns a Porsche.
They make bibelots and toys for America's worst and most incompetent track drivers, setting the lowest possible standard.
Wow, Jack, tell me how you really feel.
I timed every single PCA race car NGT2 RS and everything at a PCA track day 3-4 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of them was slower than my daughter in a 1.9 liter spec racer Ford.
I have always been a big believer in the best track car is a spec Miata. Shit like that.
It was ironically until they became vintage cars. Now they're hard to fix. But my wife drives an NCMX5 Cup car. That's a great racing platform. It's a great platform for her. She's had a lot of victories with it. Anyway, difficulty with Porsche is when I used to own 3 Porsches, so I own 3 Lexuses right now.
Sold a 993 way too early.
Are you kidding? I traded that car even up for a Radical SR8, for a fully refurbed Radical SR8 that listed for 139 grand.
Oh, okay. You didn't do so bad.
Yeah, I didn't do so
I didn't
bad.
know that part. I thought you sold it.
I didn't sell it. I traded it because I didn't want to pay basis tax on the fact that I paid $29,200 for it.
Amazing.
Do you know the two things that the IRS, the two collectible items that the IRS makes you pay gains on?
Cars.
And
Guitars.
musical instruments.
Really?
Yeah. I found that out when I made like $9 grand on a Gibson R9. There's an IRS cost.
Man, your hobbies are paying for you, man. They're paying out.
For every time I made $9,000 on a guitar, I assure you I lost $9,000 multiple times. Would you like to buy some guitars?
No, thank you, sir. You know, I will admit, I too have collectibles. Nothing crazy, but I wish, like I've always been a good saver, but I wish my funds, percentage-wise, have done as well as my diecast collection has.
Diecast is fun stuff. And
like, I am the Warren Buffett of the diecast world.
Good for you.
I got that going for me. Nothing else.
Viewers, let's get a tip here. Give me a Jim Cramer diecast that will have in value as soon as you mention it.
If you try to buy a CMC birdcage right now, I think there's no more air left in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there's no more air left in any air.
And I don't take stock tips from Jim Cramer.
You know, I know the guy who hired and then fired Jim Cramer. He works in media.
I was not. Well, I mean, it's CNBC.
Yeah, the guy kicked Jim Cramer out of his media job, so he had to go do his thing.
Fascinating.
He says, first thing I want to say is I apologize for unleashing this guy on the greater world. You know,
I mean, there's no shame in his game. I mean, the guy he's a good media personality, but I wouldn't take stock tips from him.
You know, they had the whole Bitcoin drop, 3 hours after he said he was bullish on it. In any event, Porsche is now, they make 300,000 cars where they used to make 30,000. Most of the cars are disposable junk. They're Audis or VWs with a fancy nose on them.
Wow.
And the cars that are truly fast and inspiring to drive are really expensive, and they're treated like die-casts. You know, they get sold and bought and taken to Malibu and Cars and Coffee.
Magnus Walker yelled at me for not putting enough miles on my car. Yelled at me at Porsche Santa Clarita.
Well, I think you should be able to. If I were to put 10,000 miles on my Chrysler in 2.5 years, I can do it. You can put as many miles on your car as you want, but when the overall market, I mean, the Porsche market is like the Rolex market, right? Porsche is every boy's first sports car. Like you're some 30-something kid.
No, it's a Toyota, my friend. It's not the first sports car.
I was 29 when I bought my 993. I mean, to me, that was an entry-level car. And it was 4 years old. It was a used car. You know, the young guys now, the kids making a little bit of money, they want to buy a 911.
I totally disagree with you. Okay, you and I usually see eye to eye on this kind of stuff, but this we disagree because a 911, do you realize that a base 911 is 135 grand now?
Yeah.
That's not an entry-level car.
My 993 was 60 grand new. That's the same kind of money.
Like, entry-level for a guy making a decent amount of money is a $50,000 car. That's a Supra. Or your wife's Z. That's an entry-level sports car.
I don't think you can afford. I see both the girls' payments. I don't think you can afford a Z on 50 grand a year.
No, you can't.
What I'm getting at here is that the Porsche is the gateway. Porsche is like Rolex, okay?
Mm.
In fact, Porsche is so much like Rolex, we should have a separate podcast about it.
Maybe that'll be our next discussion.
Artificial scarcity. They make so many of them, and yet people don't realize. I mean, Rolex makes more watches than the next three biggest Swiss manufacturers combined, right? Porsche makes more of these GT whatevers than every other legitimate sports car manufacturer combined, right? Mm-hmm. People don't use them. They worry about scratching them. There's a whole culture based on just showing them off on social media. And because of that, there's some real joy lost in the cars. I put 80,000 miles on my 993.
Mm-hmm.
This is a family podcast, or so you said before we started. So I will just say that anything you can imagine a Colombian Coke dealer doing in that car, I did in that car.
You have a very Interesting way of putting things.
Yeah. And if this being if that means that he took good care of it and used Zano polish, I did do that. So, but the cars used to be disposable. They used to be fun. And now I hear people talk about, well, you know, you got to get the clear bra and the star shield, and you have to do all this stuff and count the overedge. You know how many times I money shifted that 993 going sideways through a public intersection somewhere? I mean,
I will fully admit that I bought my GT3 as a canyon car. Never bought it to take it on a track. Never.
I applaud that because it's not a great track car.
I was very honest about that from the beginning. I will tell you now that this month is 2 years. I've owned it 2 years in a week. And I will tell you, it's the most expensive car I've ever bought. And the thing that is concerning about it to me, I do worry about it more. Like, I do not take that car to, let's like my nephew, I'm not going to take him for ice cream in that car.
Why not?
Because I don't want to put it in the parking lot. But I will take him to the canyons for the afternoon.
What's going to happen if somebody's going to ding the door?
I don't want to ding the door. Yeah.
So, you know, if a car that you'll eventually sell for $200,000 needs $2,000 worth of door repair, does it matter?
I am OCD, so maybe I'm special in this area. I just don't want to go through the hassle. That's the other thing about this car that I've learned. It's like I've owned Supras, I've owned RX-7s, I've owned M cars, I've owned regular BMWs, and I don't worry about it. There wasn't this like, oh my God, I need to be so fussy about it. And this car, I will admit, I'm crazy fussy about it.
It's because you're an old man like me and it's a destination car. When I get my destination car, I'm going to be fussy with it.
Now, what do you define as a destination car?
The destination car is the car that you're going to buy with the most money you're prepared to spend in your adult lifetime. That feels like a singular accomplishment.
I will be honest and tell you, it is an obscene amount of money what I had to spend to buy that car.
Yeah.
And the only reason I was willing to actually write a check for that car was because I knew I was going to get my money back.
Yeah.
That's if you told me, even 5 years ago, that I would spend that kind of money on I'd tell you, you are nuts. There's no car worth it. But the fact that the market is there, and I know I'll get my money back, now I can have fun with it. That's why I don't feel bad taking it out to the canyons and screaming down at 9,000 RPM and going around corners.
I love that for you, as the kids say.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I love it for you.
Is this one of these areas we disagree?
I will say this. The more times you feel lucky to walk away alive from something in your life, I'm not saying you don't have those, okay? The more of them you have...
Talking to a guy that met the front end of a Tesla at 45 miles an hour.
The more often that happens, the less you will worry about the investments of futurity, or the game of life theory, where when you die, they're gonna take all the kids out of the little plastic cart. Game of Life, young viewers, is from the 50s.
Yes.
And you had to make money all the way through, and then at the end, the person with the most money won.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you buy anything in this world thinking you're going to get your money back, then I don't know. I don't know how to look at that. I've never bought anything. I don't buy investments. I bought Ford stock thinking I wouldn't get my money back, and I did. And then I promptly blew up a motor racing Grand Am and had to spend all the money on the motor. So, but people buy Rolexes thinking they're going to get their money back, which is another thing. And
that's different. I'm a buy and hold on watches.
But you're a car guy, so the GT3 is your equivalent of, like, I'm on the list for a Skydweller, and you know, if I had a Skydweller, I think I'd be nice to it. I don't think I'd bang up my Skydweller.
Yeah.
But because I'd like to sell it eventually. But
so you understand it.
I do understand it, but I do think it's
you don't
a
respect
shame.
it.
No, it's not respect. It's a shame that it's so prevalent. You're not the only. If you were the only person I knew who told me that, I'd go, you know, George, he's got this unique attitude, and I think it's going to work for him. But when you go to Cars and Coffee in Malibu and ask everybody there why they bought a GT3, resale value will be right on the top.
So I don't know when this is going to come in a couple of weeks. What you don't know is there's something in the garage I'm going to show you which is a surprise.
Is
And
it?
I think it's going to shock you.
I hope it's something with zero investment potential.
Oh, it has nothing to do with investments.
So even better.
Zero. It's all the story. The audience already has seen it,
Okay.
but you haven't.
I haven't. This is, oh my gosh, this is like...
Actually, you know what? I'll tell you what. They know what it is. 3 guesses. What is it?
it's a car, right?
It's a car. It's the reason why I'm here.
Is it an American car?
Yes.
Is it a big 3 car?
Yes.
Is it a pony car?
No.
Was it made in the last 20 years?
No.
Is it a Stutz Blackhawk?
No.
Other than I don't care.
I have better taste than that. Okay, so
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
you know what I may do?
I hope it's a 6000 STE.
I love this. Have we talked about this?
No, but everybody loves it.
Did you watch my Bob Boniface episode?
No, but a friend of mine just restored a stick shift Grand Prix STE.
Okay, stop the presses. I didn't know that existed, and then I did some research. Turns out 1 year only, 87, it existed.
This guy just built a perfect one out of two imperfect cars.
Wait a minute.
Hundreds of hours of labor.
Was his car born manual?
Yes, but his parts car wasn't.
Where does this car exist? Where does it live?
Should I tell him? I mean, it's in Boston. It's outside Boston.
Okay, next time I'm anywhere near Boston, you're going to connect me. I need to shoot this car.
This is the guy who built what I used to call the Singer Milan, my 5-speed Milan that he put 15 grand on.
Yeah.
This was his project after the Milan.
The audience knows this. I love 6000 STEs. Okay, so you and I have done a ridiculous weave here to the point where we got the My Kryptonite, a 6000 ST. Let's just put a pin in that. We're going to Boston.
Yeah,
we're driving that car.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I think we need to wrap everything up.
Let's do
We
it.
need to bring this all together. Give me 3 how you see things going positively, 3 positive outcomes, and 3 potential pitfalls of the impact of the automotive industry on, as we've discussed, the youth of America. Or really American culture, I think is a better way to put it.
Okay, 3 positive things. First thing is that the American automotive story is fundamentally a story about mobility, not in the horrible bugman sense of the word, right? But in the sense, there are only what are the only 2 stories that have ever been told, right? A man goes on a trip and a stranger comes to town. These are both mobility stories. And for young people, for our culture, the more mobility we give them, the better off we're going to be. And when I see the EV mandates rolled back, when I see a little bit of the cafe boot come off the neck, I see the idea of more people being able to be mobile, to travel, to experience the automobile, to interact with this country in something besides their square they hold in front of their face all day. So that's one good thing. I think that the return of American manufacturing, practiced by the entire Big 3, and frankly, always practiced by Honda and Toyota, is only going to bring out...
And the Koreans.
Yeah. Is only going to bring about better outcomes for Americans and their families and the people with whom they work and their communities, everything else. Nothing helps this country more than building something here. It just doesn't. A third positive thing is I think we're going to see a return to enthusiast-oriented, overtly sporting nameplates, trim levels, whatever. You know, we're in this era of every crossover looks like every crossover we've been there before. We were there with the cars of the 50s, cars of the 60s, the box cars of the 80s, right? There's always been a John Z. DeLorean. There's always been a Bob Lutz. There's always been a guy to say, hey, you know what? If you put a couple red stripes on this thing, maybe it'll do something. I think we're going to see a return. I think we might even see an overtly sporting Trax. Who knows?
Why do you think that is the case?
Because the more generic and identical the product gets, the more you need surface differentiation. The sporting revival that culminated in all these great enthusiast cars of the 90s and the 2000s started with tape and stripe specials of 1982.
The X11.
Yeah.
I think that's the
The
title.
X11, I would
the
not.
title of this
I
episode
would
is going to be
not.
X11.
X11. I'm not going to call it the X11 a tape and stripe special. I had a different tune, but things like the Cougar RS of 1984, stuff like that. We're going to start off by making the cars look a little more rizzed up. Am I allowed to say that? And then eventually the cars are going to have to be a little more rizzed up. Assume the virtue if you have it not, as they say. And so I think this is as low as we're going to get. I think the showrooms of today are as non-enthusiast focused as they're going to be in the next 30 years. I think the tide is going up.
Do you see that as a function of the tide going up because volumes will still stay the same or increase? Or do you see the mobility cars become the bastion of more and more wealthy folks, and thus what will be on offer will be more individual models?
I'm going to go on record saying I hope that 2025 has the greatest number of wealthy people buying wealthy cars in history. I hope that 20 years from now, we have a ton of X11s and Escort GTs, and the newest McLaren is as rare a public discussion as the Countach was in 84.
And pitfalls, 3 pitfalls.
3 pitfalls. First thing is all 3 American manufacturers, 2.5, whatever you want to call it, they're facing a tremendous research and development debt. For years, and I've heard this from every insider, every engineer I know, for years, the best people were told that if they didn't get over to EV, they'd have no career and they would not retire out of automotive. So they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And Chevrolet has been fundamentally making the same truck since 2014, as an example. They brought back the Bolt, which is, 11 years old. Honda's lengthening product development cycles. But the big 3...
But that's on the ICE side, they're lengthening product cycles.
Right, and they had to do it to pay for EV.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, Toyota, we had a Camry update that wasn't a few years ago. In
fairness, that car is still only $28,000.
Right, but what I'm pointing out here is when was the last time Toyota didn't really revise the Camry? The reason they didn't do it was because they couldn't afford to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody's got this.
Well, hold on a minute. They could afford it. They chose not to because a totally new car is $5 billion. A refresh is $1 billion.
Be that as it may, when you do something 9 times and don't do it a 10th, it's reasonable to ask why. When you have 8 generations of Camry and the 9th one is a refresh rather than a rebuild, it's reasonable to ask why. What I'm getting at here is everybody's got to dig themselves out of the EV hole, this collective amnesia, this fog that drifted over the business. Mm-hmm. But the big 3, other than like some of the more compliant European manufacturers, the big 3 are in much worse shape compared to Honda and Toyota. Honda and Toyota have been doing new car development.
I would agree with you on Toyota, but Honda, are they big enough to say that they're healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. Honda, in any universe where you don't have to sell EVs, in any universe where people are back to buying internal combustion cars based on price, a Honda dealership goes back to being the 2nd or 3rd most valuable dealership in America.
100%, but they're shopping themselves at this point. That's what they've been doing over the past 2 years.
I wouldn't confuse what people do in the markets or what happens between businesses or between investors or venture capital funds or whatever for the realities of the market. If there's one thing I learned hanging out with rich people during my time at an insurance company, it's that they have zero idea of how cars are bought, sold, why, what happens, how they're built, indeed what they're made of. So don't worry about anything you hear about the business world. It doesn't necessarily affect the product. The last thing I'm going to say, last pitfall, is my local SCCA region. I'm one of the youngest people there. I'm 53 years old, going on 54. Even in grid life, even in autocross, the graying of our enthusiast and competitive population is a killer. We have to address it. We have to find pathways in for young people to compete. We need the equivalent of 1969's Formula V or the original sports Renault. right now, if you want to race wheel to wheel in this country, I don't see how you could race wheel to wheel in this country in anything. My Plymouth Neon, if I don't put new tires on my Plymouth Neon, my cheapest, I own 4 race cars. We have multiple race cars in the house beyond that, but cheapest race car I have to run costs $800 a year to get ready for safety tech. That's parts, not labor. And costs a lot of money in tires and everything to run. And I couldn't race that Neon all year for less than 10 grand cash. In order to have 10 grand cash, you gotta make 22 grand. Who's making 22,000 extra dollars that they don't have? Don't have another thing to do with, right?
Are you putting the cart before the horse and saying, if we don't have racing, we're not going to have this vibrant youth? Wouldn't you say we first have to get folks being able to afford a car first, then get to the point of an enthusiast car, then get to the point of the extra $22,000 to keep a 20-year-old Neon on the road, or 30, whatever it is?
You know, both things are true, right? And they're going to have to happen at the same time. Racing has to be, real automotive competition has to become more affordable, and there have to be more people who can afford it at any level, and there have to be cars they can race. It's a multi-layered problem, but my biggest concern is people don't realize how deeply wheel-to-wheel competition is woven into automotive enthusiasm, because most people don't track their cars. They're cars and coffee people. They're no prep drag cars or whatever. But every one of these cars, the guys at SRT who engineered all these Hellcats and stuff that they sold, they could keep selling now, right?
Eric Heuschler, great guy.
Yeah, Eric's a rotor. He and I won a race at Buttonwillow together. Yeah, I think we did. No, we lost a race at Thunderhill together. Won a race at Buttonhill.
Great track.
Greg Smith, another Chrysler engineer. But anyway, the idea being is that these engineers, what gets them up in the morning is a lot of time road racing and that kind of stuff. When you go race at Waterford Hills and everybody there works for a big 3 company, we need to preserve and work on having a path forward for competition. And even if you personally never want to take a lap on a track, you are worse off if it's not possible.
So put another way, it's not just politics is downstream from culture. Culture in the car world is downstream from racing.
Yeah, and racing is downstream from economics.
So in a very roundabout way, the answer to all the world's ills, more people need to race.
Yeah, just not in Prototype 2 next year, because I have a divisional championship to defend, and I don't feel I have the strongest car. So other than that, yes, please everybody go race everything else.
Okay, so on that bombshell, I thank you for coming up.
Thanks for having me. I love your new studio. Look on Google Earth. It's an entirely black cube.
You know what we got to keep an eye on? I think you and I have to look at this not just as the automotive industry, but it's a combination of the automotive industry and this, I guess, resurgence of common sense living beyond political cycles. I think that will positively impact the automotive industry. True or false?
True, and let me say unequivocally, for anybody who's managed to sit through all this, that there is no political viewpoint out there short of Brezhnev or Trotsky that can't uplift and support and benefit from automotive enthusiasm. If you're an Occupy Wall Street type of guy and you think that club racing or autocross isn't for you because of your politics, you're wrong. That stuff's here for everybody. And nothing frustrates me more than people thinking that car enthusiasm is inextricably linked to a particular point of view. You know, the ownership of lifted trucks might be, but the ownership of sports cars is not.
On that note, my friend, I can't thank you enough for making the trip up here. 3 hours was a long drive. And this conversation, I know we were going to talk about the industry and where it's been and where it's going, but I think we almost solved the world's problems.
Yeah, it's just a matter of everybody else doing exactly what we think they should do.
That's not at all what we said. It's we tried to give them hope. You are a truth teller and a hope giver. On that note, until we see you in the next episode, bis später.